December 1944. The snow falls like ash over eastern Poland, blanketing the ruins of what used to be a village. Oberst Klaus Reinhardt crouches behind the shattered remains of a stone wall, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts that fog the frozen air. Around him, the sounds of artillery have finally stopped, replaced by something worse: silence. The kind of silence that comes after defeat. His regiment, once 300 strong, has been reduced to scattered ghosts retreating through the winter landscape. The iron cross pinned to his chest feels heavier than it ever has, a weight of duty that no longer means anything against the tide of Soviet advance. Klaus is 42 years old, a career officer who believed in order, in discipline, in the idea that war had rules. That illusion died somewhere between Berlin and here. Now he's just a man in a gray uniform, watching the last of his soldiers disappear into the tree line, knowing he won't be joining them. The Soviets come at dawn. Klaus sees them moving through the mist, a full company of Red Army infantry, their brown uniforms blending with the winter earth. He could run. Part of him wants to, but his leg is wounded. Shrapnel from yesterday's barrage, and the exhaustion in his bones runs deeper than any physical injury. He's been awake for 3 days. He hasn't eaten in 2. When the Soviet lieutenant finds him, Klaus is sitting against the wall, his pistol lying in the snow beside him, unloaded. The lieutenant is young, maybe 25, with hard eyes that have seen too much. He kicks the weapon away and yanks Klaus to his feet, shouting in Russian. Other soldiers gather around, their faces a mixture of triumph and contempt. One of them steps forward and tears the iron cross from Klaus's uniform, the pin ripping through fabric and skin. The soldier spits at Klaus's feet, then pockets the metal. Klaus says nothing. There's nothing to say. He's a prisoner now, and the war, for him, is over. They march him east for 2 days, part of a long column of German prisoners shuffling through the snow. Some are wounded, some are dying. Guards on horseback ride alongside, rifles ready, faces impassive. At night they're herded into barns or left to sleep in ditches, huddled together for warmth. Klaus watches men freeze to death in their sleep, their bodies stiff by morning, dragged to the side of the road and left behind. No one speaks. There's a resignation in the air, a collective understanding that they're being taken somewhere from which few will return. On the 3rd day, they reach a railway depot, where hundreds more prisoners are already waiting. They're loaded into cattle cars, 60 men to a car designed for 40, packed so tightly they can barely move. The doors slam shut. Darkness. The train lurches forward, and Klaus loses track of time. Days blur into nights. The smell of unwashed bodies, of sickness, of despair, becomes suffocating. Men die standing up, held upright by the press of bodies. When the doors finally open, the cold air rushes in like a knife. The camp emerges from the landscape like a wound. Barbed wire stretches in every direction, rusted and cruel under the gray sky. Watchtowers loom at each corner, searchlights sweeping the grounds even in daylight. Beyond the wire, nothing but forest and snow, endless and empty. This is deep in the Ural Mountains, far from any front line, far from any hope of liberation. Klaus is pushed through the gates with hundreds of others, processed by guards who barely look at them. Name, rank, serial number. They strip him of his remaining possessions: a photograph of his wife Anna and daughter Liesel, a pocket watch that belonged to his father. He tries to protest, but a rifle butt to his stomach ends the conversation. He's assigned to Barrack 7, a long wooden structure with gaps in the walls through which the wind howls freely. Inside, rows of wooden bunks, 3 levels high, each barely wide enough for a man to lie down. The floor is dirt. There's a single stove in the center, unlit. Men lie on the bunks like corpses, some watching the new arrivals with hollow eyes, others too far gone to care. Klaus chooses a bunk near the back, upper level. A man on the middle bunk introduces himself in broken German. Victor, a Russian who worked as a surgeon before the war, captured by the Germans in 1941, then recaptured by his own side when the line shifted. His crime: collaboration. His punishment: the same as the enemy. Victor has survived 2 years in this place by becoming invisible, by keeping his head down and his mouth shut. He tells Klaus the rules: wake at 5, work detail at 6, 12 hours of labor, logging, quarrying, whatever the guards decide. Evening ration at 7, watery soup and a piece of black bread. Lights out at 9. Anyone who can't work gets nothing. Anyone who tries to escape gets shot. Anyone who complains disappears. Simple, brutal, effective. Klaus listens and understands that this place isn't designed to hold prisoners. It's designed to kill them slowly. On the third night, Klaus meets Franz. The boy, because that's what he is, barely 19, occupies the bunk below. He's a private from Munich, captured the same week as Klaus, still clinging to the belief that the Red Cross will negotiate their release, that the war will end, and they'll all go home. Klaus doesn't have the heart to crush that hope, so he says nothing. Franz talks enough for both of them, rambling about his mother's cooking, about the girl he planned to marry, about the mountains back home. Klaus closes his eyes and lets the boy's voice wash over him, a reminder that somewhere beyond this frozen hell, life continues. That night, as the temperature drops and men begin to cough, Klaus makes a decision. He will not die here. He doesn't know how yet, but he knows with absolute certainty that if he stays, he'll become one of the frozen corpses carried out each morning. He survived this long by being smart, by planning, by thinking 3 moves ahead. He can do it again. The answer comes in the 4th week, delivered by a dying man. A French prisoner, older, maybe 60, occupies the bunk next to Klaus. He's been in the camp for 3 years, survived longer than most, but pneumonia is finally claiming him. One evening, as Klaus returns from work detail, the Frenchman gestures him closer. His breath rattles in his chest. With trembling hands, he tears open a crust of bread from his ration and pulls out a small piece of paper, folded tight. A map, crude, hand-drawn but detailed. It shows the camp layout, the surrounding forest, a route west marked in faint pencil. The Frenchman whispers in broken German that he got it from a Polish partisan who worked in the kitchen, now dead. He was saving it, waiting for strength that never came. Now he gives it to Klaus. Not because Klaus deserves it, but because the Frenchman can't bear the thought of dying with it hidden, the knowledge wasted. Klaus takes the map and hides it in his boot. That night, the Frenchman dies. Klaus doesn't sleep. He studies every line, every mark, committing it to memory until he can see it with his eyes closed. Planning an escape from a Soviet POW camp isn't a matter of courage. It's a matter of observation, patience, and timing. Klaus begins to watch everything. The guard rotations change every 8 hours. 6 to 2, 2 to 10, 10 to 6. The evening shift is the weakest, older men or those recovering from injury. The searchlights follow a pattern, sweeping left to right, pausing at the corners. There's a 3-second gap when the beams cross. A sliver of darkness near the northeast corner, where the wire sags slightly from the weight of ice. The forest beyond is dense, offering cover within 50 meters of the fence. The weather matters too. Clear nights are suicide, too much visibility. But when a storm comes, when the snow falls thick and the wind howls, the guards retreat to their towers. The searchlights become useless, and sound is swallowed by the blizzard. Klaus shares his observations with Victor and Franz. Victor thinks he's insane. Franz thinks he's brave. Klaus knows he's neither. He's just desperate enough to try. The storm comes in mid-January. Klaus feels it building all day, the pressure dropping, the wind picking up, the sky turning the color of old bruises. By evening, snow is falling in thick curtains, visibility reduced to a few meters. At dinner, Klaus barely eats, passing most of his ration to Franz. The boy will need the strength. Klaus has recruited 2 others, a silent Austrian named Hans and a Bavarian sergeant named Dieter, who claims he knows how to navigate by stars. After lights out, they wait. The barracks settle into the usual sounds of coughing, snoring, the occasional cry of someone lost in nightmare. At midnight, Klaus moves. He wakes the others with a touch. They dress in every piece of clothing they own, layer upon layer, stuffing straw from the mattresses into their boots for insulation. Victor grips Klaus's arm, says nothing, but his eyes say everything. Good luck, you'll need it, I'll remember you. Then they're moving, slipping out through a gap in the back wall that Klaus loosened days ago, into the screaming wind. The cold hits like a physical blow, 30 below zero, maybe colder. The snow stings exposed skin, finds every gap in their clothing. They move in single file, Klaus leading, staying low, keeping to the shadows between barracks. The searchlights sweep overhead, but the beams diffuse in the snow, turning everything into a white blur. They reach the wire. Klaus has a piece of metal, a broken spoon handle, sharpened, and he works at the base of the fence where rust has weakened the links. It takes forever. His fingers go numb. Behind him, Franz is shaking so hard Klaus can hear his teeth chattering. Finally, the wire parts. Klaus pulls it back, creating a gap just wide enough to crawl through. One by one, they slip under, into the no-man's land between the inner and outer fences. The outer fence is newer, stronger, but there's a drainage culvert that runs beneath it, partially collapsed but passable. Klaus found it weeks ago during a work detail. They crawl through mud and ice water, emerging on the other side soaked and freezing. Then they run. The forest swallows them. Dense pine and birch. The trees so close together the wind can't penetrate as deeply. Klaus doesn't stop running until his lungs are burning and his legs threaten to give out. Behind him, the others crash through the undergrowth, graceless and loud, but there's no pursuit. The storm has given them a gift. The guards won't notice they're missing until morning roll call, and by then the snow will have erased their tracks. They huddle in a hollow beneath a fallen log, pressed together for warmth. No one speaks. Franz is crying silently. Whether from fear or relief, Klaus can't tell. Dieter checks a small compass he managed to smuggle, confirms they're heading west. West, toward Poland, toward Germany, toward home. It's over 2,000 kilometers away. They have no food, no proper clothing, no weapons. Klaus knows their chances of making it are almost zero, but almost zero is better than the certainty of death in the camp. As the storm rages around them and the first gray light of dawn begins to filter through the trees, Klaus allows himself one moment of something that might be hope. They're free. For now, that's enough. The Ural wilderness is beautiful in the way that death is beautiful. Cold, perfect, and utterly indifferent. They walk for days through forests that seem to have no end, navigating by Dieter's compass and the sun when it occasionally breaks through the clouds. The temperature never rises above -20. At night it plunges to -40 or worse. They have no tent, no sleeping bags, nothing but the clothes on their backs. They sleep huddled together in hollows or beneath overhangs, pressed so close that Klaus can feel every shiver, every labored breath of the men beside him. On the third day, Hans doesn't wake up. His body is stiff, frozen in sleep, his face peaceful. They have nothing to dig with, so they cover him with snow and branches and move on. No words, no ceremony, just the simple acknowledgement that death is part of this now. Hunger becomes the dominant force in their existence. They eat bark stripped from birch trees, chewing it into pulp that provides no nutrition but at least fills the stomach. They melt snow for water, drinking until their bellies distend. Franz finds a frozen rabbit, dead from the cold, and they devour it raw, too desperate to risk a fire. Dieter's feet start to turn black from frostbite. He can barely walk, but he keeps moving because stopping means dying. Klaus's own body is failing. He's lost at least 20 pounds, his ribs visible through his skin, his face gaunt and hollow. But his mind stays sharp. He has to keep thinking, keep planning, because the moment he stops is the moment they're all lost. On day 12, they spot civilization, a small farmhouse set back from what might be a road, smoke rising from the chimney. They watch from the tree line for hours, no movement except an old woman carrying firewood. They're desperate enough to risk it. Klaus approaches alone, hands visible, moving slowly. The woman sees him and freezes, her eyes wide. He speaks to her in German, realizes his mistake, switches to broken Russian learned in the camp. He tells her they're starving, that they mean no harm. She stares at him for a long moment, and Klaus sees the calculation in her eyes, the risk of helping, the consequence of refusing. Finally, she gestures them inside. The warmth of the house is almost painful after so many days in the cold. She feeds them potatoes and cabbage soup, watching them eat with a mixture of pity and suspicion. When Klaus tries to thank her, she cuts him off. She tells them in slow Russian that her sons died in the war, both of them, one at Stalingrad, one at Kursk. She doesn't care who they are or where they're going. She just knows they're someone's sons too. They sleep that night on her floor, and it's the first real sleep Klaus has had in weeks. They stay 3 days, regaining some strength, though Dieter's feet are beyond help. The old woman gives them food for the road, bread and dried fish, and warns them that Soviet patrols pass through every few days. They leave before dawn, but they carry something beyond food, a reminder that even in the middle of this frozen hell, humanity persists. The walking gets harder. Dieter slows them down. leaning heavily on Franz, his face gray with pain. On day 18, he can't continue. His feet are gangrenous, the infection spreading up his legs. He knows it. They all know it. He asks Klaus to leave him. Klaus refuses. They fashion a crude crutch from a branch, but it's clear he won't make it much farther. That night, Dieter volunteers to stay behind, to rest while the others scout ahead. Klaus understands what he's really saying. Franz doesn't, or pretends not to. In the morning, Dieter is sitting against a tree, still and silent, the compass placed carefully on the snow beside him. Klaus takes the compass, closes Dieter's eyes, and they keep walking. Day 31. They stumble into a village, a real one, not just a farmhouse, nestled in a valley. It's small, maybe 20 buildings, most of them in disrepair. The war has emptied it of young men, leaving only women, children, and the elderly. Klaus and Franz are so weak they can barely stand, their clothes in tatters, their faces black with frostbite. An old woman finds them collapsed near the well and calls for help. They're carried to a cellar beneath a house hidden from view. The woman, Katya, brings them soup and bread, asks no questions. She has kind eyes and hands roughened by labor, and when she tends to their frostbite with rags soaked in hot water, Klaus sees his mother in her movements. They stay in the cellar for 3 days, sleeping on straw, eating proper food, slowly returning to something resembling life. Katya's daughter, a woman in her 30s named Irina, brings them clothes, old shirts and trousers that belong to her dead husband. Franz weeps with gratitude. Klaus simply nods, too overwhelmed to speak, but safety is an illusion. On the 4th day, a truck arrives in the village. NKVD, Soviet secret police. Katya's face goes pale when she hears the engine. She rushes down to the cellar and tells them they have to leave immediately. Someone must have reported them, or perhaps it's just a routine check, but the NKVD are thorough. Klaus and Franz grab what little they have, but before they can move, they hear boots upstairs, voices shouting in Russian. Klaus spots a tunnel at the back of the cellar, a root tunnel that leads to the outside. He pushes Franz toward it, and they crawl through dirt and darkness as gunfire erupts behind them. They emerge in a potato field behind the house, gasping, covered in mud. Looking back, Klaus sees Katya being led out of her house, her hands bound. She doesn't struggle. She meets his eyes across the distance, and in that moment, Klaus understands the cost of kindness. He wants to go back, to do something, but Franz is pulling at him, and he knows that going back would make her sacrifice meaningless. So they run. The guilt of leaving Katya behind haunts Klaus more than anything else on this journey. At night, when he closes his eyes, he sees her face, calm and resigned. He doesn't know what happened to her, whether she was arrested, shot, or sent to a camp herself. He'll never know. All he can do is keep moving, to honor what she gave them. But the weight of it crushes something inside him, some last piece of optimism or faith. He stops talking except when necessary. Franz notices but says nothing. They're both hollowed out now, more ghosts than men, driven forward by instinct rather than will. Day 52. Franz is sick. It starts as a cough, becomes a fever, turns into pneumonia. There's nothing Klaus can do. They're in the middle of nowhere. No shelter, no medicine, nothing but cold and trees. Franz's breathing becomes labored, rattling in his chest. Klaus carries him when he can no longer walk, but they make almost no progress. On the 53rd day, Franz can't go on. Klaus finds an overhang, builds a small shelter from branches, and holds the boy as he dies. Franz's last words are about his mother, about the mountains, about how he wishes he could have seen spring one more time. Klaus buries him in the snow, marks the grave with a stick, and stands there for a long time, unable to move. He's alone now, truly alone. The silence of the forest presses down on him, and for the first time since escaping, Klaus considers giving up. It would be easy. Just lie down in the snow and let the cold take him. But something won't let him. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe it's the thought of Anna and Liesel. Maybe it's just that he's come too far to quit now. He adjusts his pack, checks the compass, and starts walking again. The days blur together. Klaus stops counting. He moves through the forest like an automaton, his mind shutting down everything except the basic functions of survival. He doesn't feel hunger anymore, or cold, or pain. He's beyond those things. His body is consuming itself, burning muscle for fuel, but he keeps moving. He finds a road, the first real road he's seen. and follows it west, staying hidden in the trees, moving only at night. Soviet military vehicles pass occasionally, but he's invisible now, just another shadow in the forest. He scavenges what he can: a discarded boot, a tin can, a piece of rope. These small treasures keep him alive. He catches a fish in a stream with his bare hands, eats it raw. He finds abandoned villages, houses burned and empty, and sleeps in the ruins. Day 68. Klaus reaches a river. It's wide and frozen, the ice thick but not solid. There are dark patches where the current runs too fast to freeze completely. This is it, the border. Beyond that river is Poland, or what used to be Poland, now occupied territory but still one step closer to Germany. Soviet patrols watch the crossing points, but the river stretches for kilometers in both directions. Somewhere there's a place to cross. Klaus watches from the tree line, studying the patrols, the ice, the patterns of movement. He waits until nightfall, then makes his move. The ice groans under his weight. Every step is a gamble. Halfway across, he hears it, a sharp crack like a gunshot. The ice gives way beneath him, and he plunges into water so cold it stops his heart. For a moment, he's sure he's dead, but survival instinct kicks in. He thrashes, grabs the edge of the ice, pulls himself up. His clothes are instantly frozen, his body shaking so violently he can barely control it. But he's on the ice again. He crawls the rest of the way, every meter an eternity, until he reaches the far shore and collapses in the snow. He doesn't remember the next few days. They're a blur of fever and delirium, of crawling through snow, of collapsing and waking and crawling again. He has no idea where he is or where he's going. Time loses all meaning. At some point he realizes he's being carried. Voices speak in Polish. He's in a house, lying on a bed covered in blankets. A woman is spooning soup into his mouth. He tries to speak but can't form words. Days pass. His fever breaks. He learns he's in a safe house run by Polish partisans, part of an underground network smuggling people west. Refugees, resistance fighters, anyone fleeing Soviet control. They don't ask questions. They just see another broken soul needing help. Klaus stays with them for 2 weeks, regaining enough strength to walk. They give him papers, forged documents identifying him as a displaced person from Warsaw. They tell him how to reach the next safe house, then the one after that. It's a chain stretching all the way to the German border. The journey through Poland takes another month. Klaus moves from village to village, farm to farm, hidden in barns and cellars, transported in wagons under loads of hay. The people who help him are risking their lives, and he knows it. But no one hesitates. There's a network of quiet resistance here, a web of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Slowly, Klaus begins to feel human again. He can think clearly, can remember who he was before all this, but he's also aware that the man who left Bavaria in 1941 is gone. That man believed in order and duty. This man knows only survival and the kindness of strangers. Day 73. Klaus stands at the edge of Bavaria. Spring has arrived while he was walking. The snow is melting, the trees are budding, the world is coming back to life. He hasn't seen his family in 4 years. He doesn't know if they're alive, if the house still stands, if they even remember him. The last partisan to help him gave him enough money for a train ticket and directions to his village. Klaus boards the train in civilian clothes, his hair grown long, his beard thick, his body skeletal beneath the borrowed coat. No one looks at him twice. He's just another refugee, one among millions drifting through the ruins of Europe. The train takes him to within walking distance of home. He gets off at the station and stands on the platform, staring at the mountains in the distance. His mountains, the ones he grew up seeing every morning. They haven't changed. Everything else has, but they're still there, solid and eternal. He starts walking. The roads are familiar but different, marked by war. Craters filled with dirt, buildings missing walls, orchards burned. But there's life too. People rebuilding, planting crops, carrying on because that's all there is to do. Klaus walks for 3 hours until he sees it, his house. A small farmhouse on the outskirts of the village, white walls and a red roof, a garden in front. It's still standing. He stops at the gate, unable to move. 4 years, 73 days of escape, thousands of kilometers walked, and now he's home. But he doesn't know if he belongs here anymore. The front door opens. A girl runs out into the yard. Liesel, but not the 6-year-old he left behind. She's 10 now, tall and lean, her hair in braids. She's playing with a wooden toy, laughing at something. Klaus's chest tightens. She doesn't recognize him. Why would she? He's a stranger, a gaunt figure in borrowed clothes, standing at the gate. Then Anna appears in the doorway. His wife. She's thinner, older, her face marked by worry and time, but she's still the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. She looks at him, her eyes scanning his face, and for a moment there's nothing. No recognition, no understanding. Then something shifts. Her hand goes to her mouth. She takes a step forward, then another. Then she's running, and Klaus is moving too, and they meet in the middle of the yard. She doesn't say his name. She just holds him, her body shaking with sobs, and Klaus wraps his arms around her and realizes he's crying too. Liesel watches, confused, then cautious recognition dawns in her eyes. She approaches slowly, and Klaus kneels down so he's at her level. He doesn't know what to say. How do you explain 4 years? How do you explain what you've become? So he says nothing. He just opens his arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Liesel steps into them. The three of them kneel in the yard, holding each other, and Klaus Reinhardt weeps for the first time since before he was captured. He's home, but the man who left never returned. That man died somewhere in the snow between the Urals and here, replaced by someone harder, sadder, but somehow still alive. And maybe that's enough. Maybe survival itself is the only victory that matters. The spring sun warms his face, and for the first time in 73 days, Klaus allows himself to stop running.